hey, the month of January and February is going to be tough. We're going to make outsize demands and requests of you. I sometimes would work 20 hours straight during that time. I was a little bit famous there for crawling off to a corner of the warehouse and sleeping on a roll of bear fur that was to be used by production. But yeah, we knew what we were getting into, and everybody, had positive attitude about it, and it was led from the CEO on down.
Welcome to Stickology. Today I'm joined by Tom Funk, an e-commerce and marketing leader who's been building digital businesses since the early days of commercial web. Tom has led marketing and e-commerce teams at iconic brands like Keurig, Green Mountain Coffee, Vermont Teddy Bear, Pajamagram, and Ann Clark, where he currently leads e-commerce for the largest cookie cutter company in America. Tom also teaches digital marketing and consumer behavior at the University of Vermont and Champlain College, working closely with the next generation of consumers and business leaders. Today, we're going to talk about what actually creates loyalty, how internal decisions show up in customer behavior, and what leaders need to consider as buying habits change. Tom, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you
I really
so much,
appreciate
Stephen.
it.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's dig in. You've worked in e-commerce and digital marketing for a long time. So what first got you thinking about loyalty and customer relationships?
Stephen, we were talking earlier about how my first big job in e-commerce was at the Vermont Teddy Bear company, which great company, really fun category, but really the antithesis of loyalty. We spent all year long bracing ourselves for about a week of really peak Valentine's Day season because people were giving a teddy bear, perhaps, embroidered with a personal message, to a Valentine, to a loved one at Valentine's Day. And so that was, an incredibly big preparation for a buying behavior that happened only once a year. And, we did a little Christmas business, et cetera. But, that was our biggest business. And it was spawned by some media that hardly exist anymore, like, live read, disc jockey, talk radio ads. But we were also doing digital marketing. But in that job, we began to realize that there were opportunities to try and create more lasting occasions and opportunities, and more frequent opportunities to sell product to customers. So we launched the Pajamagram line of business, which was pajamas sold as a gift with a personalized card and candy and things like that. That gave us some advantages because, unlike teddy bears, they were consumer non-durables. They would eventually wear out. They also had a self-purchase. Some people bought pajamas not just as gifts, but for themselves. And it might be something that worked for Mother's Day and a birthday and Christmas. So that was my evolution to, a once a year kind of a product to a few times a year product. But really the sort of acme of the loyalty experience for me professionally was when I worked at Green Mountain Coffee Roasters and Keurig, because we were a everyday use case and also addictive. So that's nice. That was sort of the evolution for me from really lack of loyalty to, the sort of pinnacle of loyalty.
One of the things, Tom, that I'm hoping we can do on this conversation is ping pong a little back and forth between customer experience and employee experience, and maybe just backing up to the Vermont Teddy Bear. One of the things that's so interesting is I imagine that with that cyclical aspect to the business, the culture and the feeling must have changed dramatically at high time versus low, and then I imagine it also changed a lot as you made that transition into having at least more regularity in sales. So I'm curious if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that company excelled in company culture that enabled us to have that shared purpose that focused us on those critical couple of weeks. And we had a peak kind of committee, which was made up by all of the managers, the functional heads, and led by Katie Langrock, who was our chief operating officer, and Liz Robert, the CEO. So literally on February 15th, we started the operational and marketing planning for the next Valentine's Day. And from a culture perspective, too, that company had incredible sort of esprit de corps. In the summers, which is a less busy time for e-commerce, we had a massive bocce tournament, lawn bowling in teams of two, and every single member of the company, regardless of their functional area, would, be out there playing on a sunny day. And, we had a ton of other great cultural things that made the team hang together and feel that sense of shared purpose. It was also a real pre-announcement that, hey, the month of January and February is going to be tough. We're going to make outsize demands and requests of you. I sometimes would work 20 hours straight during that time. I was a little bit famous there for crawling off to a corner of the warehouse and sleeping on a roll of bear fur that was to be used by production. But yeah, we knew what we were getting into, and everybody, had positive attitude about it, and it was led from the CEO on down.
I think that as long as that's made clear, and there's a connection between the upfront purpose and the mission and the values of the business that's being dictated at the senior level, with an understanding and behavior of what's going on the day-to-day level, that's success, right? And it sounds like they were able to accomplish that. It was a work hard during key moments of the year and play hard, hopefully during the rest, right?
Sure, absolutely. And they would HR would hire massage therapists to come and give you a desk massage at your desk while you were working. We also had something that we called turn the walls, as in, remove the barriers between functional areas. And so if the telephone call center was deluged with calls, they would put out a PA announcement, and people whose job it wasn't to take phone calls were trained to be able to do that when the need came, or dress a teddy bear in a fireman's outfit or whatever, or fold pajamas and put them into a package, work the fulfillment lines. So we all definitely pitched in.
It sounds like you were all in it together, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think probably for a really good customer experience, which kind of leads me to my next question. I'm curious, as leaders constantly think about customers and wanting loyalty from customers, what do you think that they mean, and what do you think they misunderstand in trying to accomplish that?
I am fairly confident that what they mean is money. They want, in that 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, where 80% of your revenue is driven by 20% of your best customers, or 80% of your customer complaints might be generated by 20% of your worst customers. The cost of acquiring brand new customers is so expensive for anybody in e-commerce. I'm in a direct-to-consumer e-commerce and digital marketing type. So we're obsessed with return on ad spend. We're obsessed with the cost of ads as a fraction of revenue. And for most of the businesses in my industry, the ad cost of sales, or the total ad cost of sales, runs to about 20 to 30% of revenue. So that's a lot of money, right? And then the channels that are involved in retention, like email, SMS text, and digital subscription programs, are super cheap, and so anybody looking at that dynamic was like, oh, let's have more of those kind of customers and less those kind of customers.
Tom, I'm curious. So kind of going back to what you were talking about with the frequency of purchase, how does that alter at all how you engage with the consumer as a brand?
Yeah. So my example of Vermont Teddy Bear as a very, isolated occasion or use case, versus I worked as marketing director at Gardner's Supply Company and leading seller of gardening hard goods like plant supports and irrigation systems and raised garden beds and planters. And the use case for a lifestyle activity like gardening is multiple, and it's all year long. And at Ann Clark, where we're selling cookie cutters, well, maybe you picture the gingerbread man at Christmas time. Well, we've actually learned, especially on Amazon, which is our principal selling platform, people make cookies all year long. And we have something like 42 identified events that people make cookies for. Halloween, Thanksgiving, the football tailgate parties, and the Super Bowl, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, Easter, Mardi Gras, St. Patrick's Day. So those are all, frequent use cases that people have. Gardening is the same thing. You've got seed starting in the winter, under a grow light. You have planting, you have pruning, watering, harvesting, canning and freezing. And then in the winter, you love the hobby so much you're fantasizing about what you'll do next year, and you're gift giving to the gardeners in your life. So we did find at Gardener's Supply, and I think most merchants find it, RFM analysis, recency, frequency, and monetary value. One of the clearest signals that somebody is going to be a valuable customer is they were really recent and they spent a lot with us. So, if I just bought a car, I'm probably not going to buy a car again. But even in gardening, it wasn't, hey, they bought seed starting stuff, now I can sell them, irrigation stuff. 3 months from now, it was somehow that they were so engaged they were ready to buy again. Maybe they forgot something.
Tom, you hit up on something I think that's really important, right? There is buying out of habit, and there's buying out of passion, right? Yeah. And I'm really curious when you're able to unlock that second category, right? Which is what we all want. Mm-hmm. We want passionate consumers who really believe in our brand and want to come back over and over again. What do you think you've gotten right on a human level as a brand?
I think that as those couple of businesses are good examples of lifestyle and hobby brands. And I think of experiential brands. We're now at Ann Clark, we're also making cookie decorating and cake decorating supplies and ingredients and baking mixes, cookie mixes. And if you're part of something that people feel passionate about, and that was true of Gardner's Supply, we look at other experiential brands like King Arthur Baking or Orvis, any kind of, outdoor brand, ski company. You're part of something people already feel passionate about. And so we do try to create a lot of value-added content and tutorials and inspirational videos, because it's not always about selling something to your customer. It's also about helping them be successful at it and feel, proud of what they created, and then they share it. We often get customer service messages where somebody isn't calling to complain or emailing us to complain. They're posting pictures of what they just baked for, their kid's graduation party or birthday party, and, or girls' night out, the margarita glass cookie,
It's funny. My father, his favorite drink is a Negroni, a drink which I personally don't care for
you
much.
You don't like cough syrup?
I don't, but not unless I'm sick. Mm-hmm. But I do remember for his 80th birthday calling up one of the liquor companies and saying, he's been supporting your brand for years. Here's a picture of him. Would you please post this on social media to celebrate him? And of course, they're happy to do that, right? Because they want to see those success stories. They want to talk about everyone who loves their brand, right?
Right. So. Well, that's a great point, because I've often, we take customer calls, sometimes at, in my role now, if the phones are unattended, And I've always noticed that people who, whether they're writing you to complain or to celebrate you, they almost always try to, make the case for their level of relationship with you. I have been a customer for 8 years. I've bought 20 of this thing. I'm one of your best customers. Whether they are using that as a preamble to complain, I'm so disappointed. I've been loyal to you and you screwed me. Or, this is the relationship we have. And I think people feel that they need to do that because they're used to companies that don't know you. I mean, maybe you'll call your credit card company or your financial brokerage, and you can tell that they are identifying what level of, loyalty or, prestige you have as a customer. But a lot of times people don't feel noticed, so they have to tell you.
It's interesting. I think whether someone's calling to say thank you or calling to complain, there's a certain level of bond that they have with your brand. And I'm curious, though, there are obviously some times that customers are buying, but they're not really bonding. And I'm curious, what do you think the early signs of that are, and what ways can you combat that
Mhm.
as a brand owner?
Right. Yeah. I mean, at a high level, we do look at repeat rate, and that is probably the key metric to whether they are bonding enough to be a frequent customer. And in many companies I've been at, that's a really vanishingly small number. I've talked about the 80-20 rule. Uh, the repeat rate of a couple of those companies that I've mentioned was about 20%. And the repeat rate of even a consumable or a consumer non-durable apparel companies usually have pretty high repeat rates. What's high? 40. I talked to a outerwear company and outdoor sport company that was around 40. I have heard Orvis was at like 60, but Orvis is also having all kinds of trouble having layoffs and closing stores, so that's probably coming down. But I would say that's the sort of canary in a coal mine, that the metric is going in the wrong direction. And I think anecdotally, you will see examples of where people are connecting with your brand. Things, at Amazon has a frequently bought with kind of widget. So you can look at your products and see, well, when they buy something from me, are they buying another thing from me in that same purchase? Or are they buying something from my competitor? Anecdotally, you can see whether, we're often the beneficiaries of people not sticking to other brands too. I bought from this company, but they disappointed me in some way, and I switched to Ann Clark or something like that.
Uh, you were kind of talking about the sad tales of companies that are going in the wrong direction, right? And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that right now. Um, but in better times, we can see sometimes companies growing at rapid paces. Uh, and I'm curious if you can talk about any of the organizations you've been at where you've seen that. I'm also curious if you could talk about how that impacted the internal um, uh, uh, culture, and probably just as importantly, how it impacted customer relationships and customer loyalty.
Yeah. Fastest growing company I think I've been involved with in my career was Keurig and Green Mountain Coffee in the 2010 to 2020 era. And the feeling of growth that is exponential and that is related to starting to see a brand everywhere, both in the workplace, say in office coffee break rooms, and buying it, obtaining it for your own home, but seeing it at homes of people you hang out with. So that kind of word of mouth, that brand awareness. And at Keurig, we also launched a subscription program. So a K-Cup monthly delivery program. It was very flexible. It offered a discount over what you'd normally pay. And, you could set a cadence and you could choose whichever flavors of coffee you had. And so that level of, sort of built-in subscription loyalty was really valuable for that company, and we tried to give a ton back to the consumer in terms of, sense that they were in a club and a VIP kind of experience. And pretty particular to that company, as we grew, we also, lost a patent. It lived out its lifespan, and so that K-cup patent became something that anybody who could make a cylinder of plastic and fill it with coffee. There were a lot of proprietary skill level kind of artisanship and production capacity, but basically that market started to become a little bit commoditized, and unless you have a value like it's better coffee and brands that the company that can just make it cheaper, or have it at more points of sale, a lot of store brands, things like that, really cut into the loyalty, the relationship that people had with their Keurig brand, because, there are other alternatives in the market. It gets a little commoditized. Also, you can't be all things to all people. So there were alternatives like Cambio Roasters is a company created by the former chief innovation officer at Keurig. And they're much more oriented toward fair trade and, some environmental sustainability efforts. And they make 100% recyclable aluminum K-cup. It's not plastic, it's aluminum, more recyclable. And so, I think the bigger a brand or market category grows, eventually it can become a little commoditized, and there are legit other opportunities or alternatives out there for consumers.
It's a really difficult challenge, right? You think about it as that a patent was coming to an end, or was in sight of being coming to an end.
Yeah.
You can approach it a few different ways. You can rest on your laurels and
Yeah.
grab every dollar that you can until that happens. You can spend a lot of money on innovation and try to think about what's next.
Wow. Yeah.
And
that's very astute. And, I love Keurig and Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. During my time there, we did develop a couple of alternative not K-cup, but coffee pod shapes that would have new patent protection, and maybe they had some advancements and innovations, and they were capable of brewing cold beverages or cafe drinks like cappuccinos and espressos. But those were not, commercially successful to the same degree that K-cup was. But when you think about that, is that about innovation, or is it like, a cross-country ski binding brand that is proprietary to the boot? Is it just a cynical effort to lock you into their system so you buy both boot and ski?
And there's innovation, there's evolution, right? And so it feels like that might have been an evolution as opposed to a breakthrough innovation. But the goal is, how do you keep them in your family, right? So
right, and I think ultimately what Keurig decided was that their manufacturing capability and their strength, their reach to very many different outlets, and their ability to offer a bunch of great coffee brands, so regional brands like Peet's and Starbucks, that relationship. So at the end of the day, it's great coffee from brands, whether you own the patent to the thing that goes into or not.
When you talk about direct to consumer loyalty programs, you talked a little bit before about Amazon being a channel. You talk about just now maybe licenses or partnerships. Many leaders worry about not owning the customer relationship, depending on which one of those routes you're going to take. What's your experience with those, and what's worked well, what hasn't?
Yeah, I think Amazon is probably the chief battleground where this war of strategy kind of takes place, and I'm a huge enthusiast for Amazon from a consumer perspective. No matter what you're selling, there's a big body of consumers that would like to buy your thing through Amazon rather than directly through your website. Uh, at Ann Clark, we consciously make the decision to focus on our website as an engagement platform, one that's really rich in tutorials and how-to videos and recipes. And we sell product on it as well, but we're just as happy to provide links over to Amazon, especially if, I said there's 42 events. Most people don't start thinking about them until a handful of days before. So if it's Halloween, I want to make cookies this weekend. If you want it in just a couple days, I'd prefer you buy it from Amazon and be sure that you're going to get it in time. So I think business leaders often get hung up on the notion that, hey, if I sell it through Amazon, I don't have the customer name. I can't reach out to them periodically and send them emails. I give up so much margin in commission and fulfillment costs. All of those things are true. I don't think they're deal stoppers. I think it's pretty important to be on there. I think most digital sellers or e-commerce brands probably should be doing about 50% of their business on Amazon and 50 on their merchant website. Not very many do.
Yeah, I think that it's a balancing act, right? The Amazon has the reach that nobody else has. And yet what's so interesting that you were talking about earlier is some of the ways that you try to engage customers on your site with content and experiences and whatnot. And the first thing that went through my head is that feels highly appropriate, but how do you even get them to your site, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're competing with so many different online environments. I would love to hear about that.
Right. Yeah, I think that people who are hoping to drive traffic to their merchant website are currently, concerned about whether AI and having the answer to most questions at the AI chat level or at a search summary level has meant that a lot of sites have seen a decline in their traffic. At Ann Clark, we haven't seen a decline, on knock wood, because I do think the value of informational content and how-to content is still increasing. It's really hard to predict what agentic commerce is going to look like and what SEO is going to look like. But at some level, you develop the great content not for search. You develop it because it helps cultivate that customer in their lifestyle experience with the thing that you're offering. And whether it's found through search or maybe it's talked about through new channels like influencers, you still have to have some faith in the content, the role that you have to communicate with the customer on things that aren't just about buy this thing.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Tom. I imagine it, even just thinking about the last 10 years and the trajectory about what the next 10 years looks like. You probably were hyper focused on search. You've been more and more focused on using influencers. I imagine you're thinking about how you're using AI as people are going less and less to doing Google searches and getting more information there. I mean, like, how are you thinking about that transition for how you get into a consumer's awareness and get engagement out of them?
Yeah, we have not positioned ourselves actively for agentic commerce, for AI, except for the fact that we're on a Shopify site and Shopify inked a deal with OpenAI. So if you're on that platform, you're going to be part of whatever they accomplish in agentic commerce. And we sell a lot of our stuff on Amazon, and Amazon has kept its walls up with regard to any of the other AI agents, and they have they've already started offering AI solutions for shopping. Principally, I think with Amazon, it's about like trying to make available things that are not sold on Amazon, but we'll see that evolve. But we really are just sticking to the sort of essentials of our business, which are product development and content development, and with some amount of faith that the new technologies are going to find it. I mean, it's hard just because anybody who's trying to develop AI or monetize AI now looks at two things that are already strained. One is the margin of people who sell products online. Can I take a commission from that? And ad dollars, if agentic commerce or if AI enjoys a ton of influx of eyeballs, those are going to end up getting monetized through ads that, Google will be selling them, but then a lot of other people who are not Google will be selling ads. So both of those actually look harder from a bottom line perspective.
Tom, also, the interesting thing is it's not just the evolution of technology, it's also the changing of demographics. And you spent a lot of time with Gen Z as a professor.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what should today's leaders understand about how this generation decides who to trust,
Right.
who to buy from,
Right.
where to go, all that stuff?
Right. Yeah. So I'm Gen X, the boomers that came just before us. They principally started their online shopping journeys by performing a Google search. Then about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, Amazon supplanted Google as the number one place where people would begin a shopping journey. The Gen Z students that I teach, they hate ads with a passion. The data says something like 37% of them use ad blockers on their browsers. I think it's higher than that. I think it's much higher than that. They over-index for starting their shopping journeys by going straight to a merchant website whose brand somehow fits their, there's an affinity there. Maybe they're mission-driven. The other places that they over-index is social commerce. They start their shopping journeys in video-rich social media like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram Reels, and they buy through the Meta Shop and TikTok Shop experiences where they never leave that platform. And they, as much as they hate ads, they are more open to product discovery through influencers.
That's a trusted source, right? I mean, it's someone that they've already bought into, and it's going to vouch for the brand or vouch for the experience,
right? And yet they're not dummies, and they also will say, well, gosh, that influencer is just saying that because they're getting paid a commission. So yeah, they're a cynical group, and I respect that, right? That's what commerce is going to continue to look like.
A really hard group to market to, I'd imagine. I just think about, I think about my own kids. I think about they want stuff immediately. Mm-hmm. Your comment about ads is so true because gosh forbid you should be watching something and an ad comes on, mm-hmm. and you think to yourself, that's how I consumed media as a child, right? Like, right. That's what paid the bills. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, absolutely.
Few more questions for you. I want to bounce back to culture, mm-hmm. for a second and really talk about how that impacts the consumer experience. There are some companies that exude positive, open-minded, innovative mindsets, and others that are filled with employees who are stretched thin, mm-hmm. or burned out, mm-hmm. or misaligned with the overall mission. Mm-hmm. How much does this internal culture shape the customer experience in your mind?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to almost always work at places that put culture first, and Vermont is maybe known for having some of those enlightened company cultures, including places that I haven't worked. But the experience I had, say at Ann Clark, the company is, relatively small, like under 50 employees, and the company does certain fairly old school kind of methods of employee engagement and morale, including things like, at Thanksgiving, every employee is given either a turkey or a ham. their choice. And steaks at the 4th of July and apparel, branded with the company logo at Christmas time. And I remember one day, when we were getting our hams and, bringing them out to the cars, somebody who worked in production, making cookie cutters said, I overheard him saying, "This is the best company I ever worked for." It's like, that's amazing, because it was so heartfelt. And, it's a food gift, that costs the company, not hundreds of dollars, I mean, in aggregate, yes, but for each employee, what, 20, 30, $40. So, gifts go a long way. Gratitude goes a long way. And I also think, your point about how this, flows out to consumers, when we have, customer service policies, they're very generous. Like, we are never going to get in a fight with our customer. It's not worth the money. Say cookie cutters, those products are very inexpensive. Most of our orders are under $20. If one gets squished in the mail because Amazon handled it roughly and somebody's unhappy, we send them a free return, resupply, replacement, no questions asked. And if they're just dissatisfied, we give them their money back, no questions asked. And you have to empower your folks to be able to do that, rather than like hem and haw and be nervous and concerned. Well, what if they're trying to take advantage of us? Or, it's like, it was $20, $10. So we try and really, elevate the idea that, our customer comes first.
Well, and I imagine from a marketing standpoint, you're also part of your mindset is if they have a really bad customer experience, or sorry, they have a bad product experience, but a great customer experience. If it's solved, they're not going to just keep that to themselves. They're going to tell 10 people about that. Right. And, that's what you want. And to the contrary, if they have a bad experience, they're going to tell 10 people about that. So what message do you want, and how much is it worth it to you?
Right.
And if you're selling for $20, what the cost to you is a fraction of that.
Right.
It seems like a no-brainer from a mathematical standpoint, right?
Absolutely.
It's so interesting that all the brands that you've mentioned, or many of the brands that you've mentioned that are Vermont based, I hadn't really clicked, but it makes sense. First of all, how many amazing brands are up there, and how many of them are lifestyle brands, and how many of them appear to at least have a real commitment to their internal culture as well, right?
Right. You got Burton Snowboards, and Jerry's, Seventh Generation, and a couple of those are now, brands of Unilever or spun off from Unilever. So some of them may have had different, even golden ages of culture that, may or may not have changed.
But at least that's the foundation of where they came from,
Sure, and
right?
they attract that kind of employee.
So, Tom, if you were to give advice to a leader who wants to start a new brand, and they want to make sure that from the get-go, it builds strong bonds with their employees, with their customers, where would you say are the best places to start?
Right. Yeah, I was thinking about that because maybe the theme of some of the things we've talked about is that it is a bias toward lifestyle brands or experiential brands. LL Bean. I remember going to a conference of the New England Direct Marketing Group that was held at LL Bean's campus, and they took us on a mountain bike ride, and we got to paddle, and if you go to Orvis campus, you can learn how to fly fish. So we're also getting to an era in our economy in the United States, and probably worldwide, where there's some declining interest in physical stuff and increasing interest in experiences. So I think that's where I would steer, is if you're not creating a brand that produces products that serve a wider, lifestyle or experiential category, then you're missing, and on Amazon, we see all the time a lot of commodity products and kitchen gadgets and stuff like that we often just ask ourselves, a company that was founded 30 years ago by, a now little old lady, Anne Clark, who was a real baker and a folk artist. What could our competitors not do that we can do? And it's tell that story, be, generous in helpful advice and how to, and celebrate the creativity of the folks that use our products. So it's not just a circle of metal, that has been bent into a shape. There's, some creativity that goes into the shapes and the trends that might have inspired them, and then what family celebrations are, they're used for.
And it sounds like meeting the customer where they are, and maybe trying to find the opportunities where you can be attractive to them, where their hearts are open, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting insight, because most of our customers find us on Amazon, and we're a commodity category for them. It may be their first time looking for a gingerbread man cookie cutter, and they're not brand centric. So if you think of the buyer journey of awareness and consideration and decision and use, and then maybe advocacy and reuse, repurchase, that last bit is a loop, but that first part is linear. And, they don't know us from Adam if they search for us on the world's biggest marketplace. But to the degree that we then can give them content and make them understand how to be more successful, that's where they stay in that loop and have some recognition. Think about us, when, Christmas is but a memory, but then they start thinking about St. Patrick's Day or Easter, So that's I think the real goal, or our real objective.
Well, I'll say that it's so interesting. Before, you mentioned that you are 50 people strong or thereabouts, and the brand projects much bigger than that. And probably because it's been around, and I've seen it, and I've used it.
Right.
But it's funny when you say that many people don't know from Adam. I wonder if that's true, because you guys have a great brand, and you clearly have made a name for yourself in the marketplace.
Right. Well, thank you. And I think that some of that has to, like what I've found, my enthusiasm has risen as I've gotten to know the market better, is there are so many things that are happening that people want to celebrate with family togetherness, and cookie baking is going to be part of that. And so a movie might come out that inspires some shape, makes it popular, or a trend. And, when the total solar eclipse came across about a third of the country, we had a solar eclipse set. It had a obscured sun and a, normal sun and a pair of sunglasses. And we sold thousands of them, or several hundred of them. And not a long lifespan. There's going to be another one in Spain, and Iceland next summer. But we try to be really trend conscious and, give people more reasons to celebrate with cookies.
Well, that's super clever, super fun. I love it. Tom, this has been really insightful. It's first of all, I love hearing the story of the brands you've been at. I love certainly when I hear about a lot of the ways that these organizations have given back to their employees, and I love how these organizations have paid it forward, or their people have paid it forward to their customers, and that loop is magical. And if more companies could be thinking that way, I think you'd have a much better employee and customer experience, which is what we all need.
Yeah, absolutely. So, amen.